Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. I am your host, Jeremy Salinas, aka Drakkenstrike, here to bring you a preview of the upcoming game from TMG. We're talking about Chimera Station, which is launching very soon on Kickstarter. And to help me talk to you all about the game is my friend, David Waybright.
Hello once again, everyone. We are excited to be bringing you this preview. It's a worker placement game with a pretty significant twist.
Which is my favorite kind of game.
Yeah,
worker placements are
placement.
The highest up on my list, so I am very excited as well to bring you guys this game. It is very cool looking. Just looking at the game alone, it looks very unique for the fact that the workers are modular.
Yeah.
And that's the big twist in the game.
And I think there's been other games where workers
can change and progress,
but not like this.
Not like this.
This has a physical representation where you're putting the workers together, which is pretty sweet, actually,
because by putting them together, you have unique abilities, which is really cool. So we're going to walk you guys through a brief turn of the game just to show you how it plays, and then we'll come back with some of our initial thoughts on the game. So to start off the game, each player is going to pick one of the 4 unique races. Now, there is an A side to these boards, and they're all the same depending upon, they're all the same period. It doesn't matter which race that you play. However, there will be a stretch goal for a unique side. We've played both sides.
Yeah.
This is what really gives the game some flavor. It has got some unique abilities for each of the characters depending upon which kind. And they kind of have their own attributes. Like, this is the green guy, so he does really well with the plant modules. Right. We got the blue guy, which does really well with the brain modules, and so forth.
Basically gives you those variable powers that I think really help a game like this shine.
Sure.
So it plays really well both ways, but boy, when you put those variable powers in there and the way they make sense thematically with each of the races, like you said, is really, really good.
Yeah, so to start off the game, each player is going to get a specified number of workers depending upon the number of players that are participating in the game. And it's all shown right here on your little column, and you're going to place those workers on these areas to denote that's what you have available. All the ones that you're not using are going to be placed off to the side. So this is what the workers look like.
Feet and a head.
Feet and a head. And this is the great part about it. As we said, they're modular. They come apart, which is very, very cool.
So cool. It brings back memories of being a kid, you know? It's like you're playing with toys and playing a game at the same time.
The next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a little mock mini draft at the beginning. You want to walk people how this works?
Yeah, I mean, this is really just to give people their starting resources.
Right.
So you determine who the first player is, and then you start with whoever the last player is going to be and go in reverse order.
Right.
And you can go through here and start, choose sort of, if you're not playing with the variable powers, this kind of gives you a little bit of that feel, because I can pick this one that gives me 2 money and a tentacles module to add to one of my workers.
Right.
Or there's one that gives me food and a bunch of money. You know,
Right.
so you kind of just get a sense for, okay, how do I want to at least start playing the game?
Right.
And then go in reverse order. They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
It just depends on how you want to play, and that'll become clearer as we talk about what some of these modules do.
So those will, the number of these that come out at the beginning of the game is also indicated on the top, depending on how many numbers people are playing. And the last player will always have a choice between 1 or 2 cards every single time.
I mean, right from the very beginning, this game seems to scale things pretty well. They've taken a lot of things into consideration for 2, 3, and 4 players.
Yeah. The next thing that will happen is each player will take their research token, and they're going to place it over to the right-hand side of their board, denoting this is their research track. The research track will progress up as you go through the game. It'll give you more workers. It'll give you perk cards, which allow you to kind of modify the game for you. Let's talk briefly about perk cards, because I think that's a really, really important aspect of the game. Perk cards are the ones that don't have backs right now. Now, to note, guys, this is a prototype game. This is not what you'll actually be getting, but it's very, very close. This is a really cool mock-up of the game that we have.
Probably, as prototypes go, a very nice prototype. We were actually able to get some pieces that are very representative of the finished pieces.
Right.
But the board, as you know, is mocked up and everything's kind of put together.
Sure. So to start off the game, you're going to have 3 perk cards that will come out that will allow people to grab those. Some of those will be able to be grabbed right away for using the B side because of the unique abilities of their technology track. So let's talk about perk cards. It's a stack of cards, and they all have unique abilities. There's roughly about 4 different types of perks that you can get in the game. These will come over to your side of the board and stay there, which are an active ability for you to use whenever you so wish. There are cards that When acquired, they have a little when acquired sign will give you points depending upon what round you are in the game. There's 5 rounds in the game to total that you will play through. Some of these cards will give you just flat out end of the game points plus a unique ability throughout the game. And that kind of works in conjunction with the unique abilities of your characters as well.
Exactly. You can find some perk cards that have nice synergies with how you're trying to play the game.
Right.
If you're going heavy with tentacles versus claws, you can find some that will benefit you in that respect. I mean, the perk cards kind of boil down to, in like a lot of games, there are end-of-game scoring cards, there's cards that have ongoing bonus effects, and then some that have really powerful, immediate powers.
Right. There are perk cards that give you victory points depending upon how many modules you have in the game. And again, there's 4 different types of modules. There are brains, there are tentacles, there are claws, and then there are plant or leafy material. We'll get into how these work because that's really the unique twist of the game. And then those will always give you some kind of unique ability through the game as well. And then there are cards that are actual modules that you can place your workers that are unique to you. So typically you'll be placing your workers on the board. You can also acquire perks that will allow you to place them on here and take a unique ability.
Yeah, basically it's sort of like an offshoot of the station, if you will.
Right.
That only you have access to.
Right.
Again, you find something like that in other games too. It's always nice to have that little place you can go that no one else can go.
Exactly.
And it's, it's really frustrating for other players when you're like, oh man, you're using that again.
So, the perk cards will be dealt out. Everyone will get their starting abilities from their start cards. A start player will be designated. And then people are going to start playing the game.
Yeah, first player starts, and at first, the game, you have limited places to go.
Right.
As Jeremy had mentioned about the modules, like on that perk card, the crux to the game is placing your workers out on these various modules. And at the beginning, you're going to be starting with basically the modules that are out on the right-hand side of the board.
The pre-printed ones that are
the
already
pre-printed ones that are on the board.
Those pre-printed ones are your basic things. They allow you to grab food, grab money, to acquire new modules, to acquire research by detaching modules, and to build new places into the station. Now, the station itself will start blank. We've put some tiles on here already, but there will be nothing on the station. They'll have 2 command hubs, A side and a B side. The B side will start covered, no matter how many players are starting, and it becomes uncovered. As we mentioned, there's 5 rounds in the game, starting with the first round. After the second round, that module will become open and will allow you to build in the future. So, placing your workers.
Yeah, so placing your workers. As we were saying, you can place down the right-hand side of the board, and what Jeremy was starting to talk about was the constructor module. And in the constructor module, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of how this game moves, progresses.
Right.
When you go here, you can choose from the reactor any of these separate modules that, that are the boards, and take one as long as you can pay for it. You'll see here there's a cost to the module, and then victory points associated with the module. So you go to the constructor, you'll take this, choose wherever you want to place it, but you have to place it adjacent to the command hub or an existing part of the station.
Right.
So once you place it, there's a fair amount of things that go on here.
Sure.
When you place it, you pay for it. You'll get the victory points for it, and those will vary depending on the round of the game that you're in. Later rounds, there's a multiplier for those points.
Right.
And then lastly, and probably sometimes most importantly, are the bonuses you get for where you're placing it.
Right.
And around the hub, they're fairly standard stuff, but as it grows out into space, there are some really juicy powers that you get to activate.
You're acquiring money, you're acquiring food, you're acquiring victory points, you are acquiring new technology, which allows you to move up. There's an ability on there to recall.
Yeah, the recall is a
really,
big one.
really powerful. Allows you to pull a worker that's been previously placed on that turn back onto your player board to be used again. There's even a really cool ability on here, which is the adjacency one, where you're allowed to use an adjacent tiles if you had a worker there after you build there. So building your station out and the timing of when you build it is just as important as what you're building in the game.
Right. Plus, that initial build gives you're not only adding to the station, getting some of those bonuses we just talked about, but then you actually use the tile right then and there that you're placing. So it's kind of like a double move, if you will.
You may use the tile, remember.
Right, that's true.
When you build, there is the may word on there, which designates that you can build it and still get the victory points for building it, but you can actually block that location.
Yeah, you don't have to move off the constructor.
You don't have to place your worker on there and use that ability. And we'll get into why that's important when we get into the claw aspect of the game. Yeah. So the other areas on the board, when you build something from the reactor, it gets removed and then everything slides to the right-hand side. Now, you'll notice underneath each of these are different abilities that you can acquire. The reactor does not refill on its own. It's actually a position on the board which a player will have to go to. When a player uses one of their workers to go to the reactor, they get a bonus depending upon what kind of modules they have connected to their worker, but they also get a bonus for what is uncovered at that time. So they can gain victory points, money, food, modules to their board, and even research, depending on how empty it is.
And then finally, that wipes the modules that are in the reactor and completely refills it with new ones.
Sure. So the last portion that I want to talk about placing on the board is the worker splicing lab. This is how you add to your worker. Now, there is a rule in the game that you can only have 2 modules per worker. I can have one more module attached to this blue guy specifically. So when you place in the worker splicing lab, that locks you into that position. It's one of the only positions in the game where you cannot be forced out, right?
Right.
Once all the placement of everybody's workers is done, and placement of workers is one at a time, so we go round and around, placing one at a time until everyone is finished. When that happens, the splicing lab will take place, which allows those players in sequential order from A to C to take their worker off and place a module that they've collected on that turn. Now, on my genetic components, I haven't collected any this turn, but if I had, I would take one of those pieces, take my guy apart, add him to that module, and then I get to place him on the board, which is really cool because, number one, you're adding to your worker, but number two, you get to take actions at the end of the round, which is always good.
Right. And it must be said that this game, the options as the game grows become bigger and greater and greater.
Right.
Because at first there's a few places to go and everyone's kind of vying for those spots, but as you're adding modules, there's a lot of places to go. You're really never at a loss for any place to go.
Right.
It just may not be the place that you want to go.
Sure.
The other cool thing is when you add that module, the number of times we've played this and I've added just the right module, and then there's a spot I can go that really benefits from having that module attached to it. It's super satisfying to add those, claws, for instance. You could add claws and then you could bump someone off of any module.
All right. So 2 very important things to notice before the round ends. One, the first player marker will always start with the same player unless someone goes to the command center. The command center allows you a really unique ability of scoring victory points for every tile that has victory points on it that is owned by another player. So say, for instance, I have a guy, one of the players has a guy here, one guy has a player there, and I am red, and I go to the command hub, I would score 3 plus 2 points, which is 5 points.
Right.
Because that's where other players are located. The other thing that happens at the end of the round, once everyone has done their placement and their splicing, in turn order from the splicing, is you have to pay food for the workers that you have.
Ah, yes, the old feeding the workers phase.
Exactly. So it's 1 food per worker. If you can't pay, you have to start losing modules, which is awful.
And you know what? This is a great part to segue into the modules, I think, because the one module that we'll start with that helps during this phase is the plant module. And literally, they're eating a little bit of themselves to feed themselves. So if you have a worker that has 1 plant module, for instance, you don't have to feed that worker.
Right.
Now, if you've doubled up and put 2 plant modules on that worker, not only do you not have to feed him, but he also generates 3 food.
2 food.
2 food.
That's because you had the special ability.
2 food. It depends. It depends on what sides of the boards you're working with. But on the A side, it generates 2 food.
Right.
So it really, it takes that sort of feeding phase kind of out of the equation for you. If you want, if you're one of those players who are like, oh, I always have to end up starving my guys at the end of that phase, you can just do that with one of your workers and have a pretty good head start on feeding your guys.
Absolutely. Now, on the bottom of the player boards, it lists all of the possibilities you can have from mixing and matching.
Yeah,
the,
and these
the
are
modules.
fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll do the tentacles. The
Go for
tentacles
it.
are the yellow pieces. If you have one tentacle attached to your character, whenever you acquire food or coin,
Or both.
you acquire one more of each of those.
Right.
If you have two tentacles, you not only get that ability, but you also, whenever you acquire a module, and again, every time we say module, it's any of these pieces, these additions that you would add to your worker, you acquire another one. And it needs to be noted as well, anytime you acquire these, typically in the game, you're going to put them on your genetic components portion of the game. They don't get added to your worker immediately. They only get added when you splice.
Right, and just to correct ourselves, those are components, because we
Yeah.
have used a couple different words
Yeah.
here. The modules are the little areas that you place on the board, and the genetic components are the parts
I'm
that
sorry,
you
yeah,
add.
that's
and
right.
we've both done that a couple times.
Yeah,
but-
mixed them around. So that's tentacles. Why don't you talk about brains?
So brains, I've used brains a couple times. And brains are really cool, because when you add one brain, so when you place a worker on one of these spaces, you're just using its power.
Right.
Unless you're building that place.
Right.
At which point you get the victory points associated with it. When you have one brain attached, you get those victory points anytime you use
place.
a module,
Right.
which is really nice. And it kind of helps it kind of puts another variable in your head when you're making those decisions. Because if you see a module out there that has a big victory points, you're thinking, well, I guess I could use that, and it's 3 victory points, so
Right.
boom.
Right.
The cool thing to me is the 2 brains. When you have 2 brains and you go to the command hub that Jeremy was describing earlier, not only are you scoring the points for your opponents and the modules that they're on, but also yours.
Right.
And if you can time that right, if you're
Yeah.
using the command hub at the end of a round in, like, let's say a 3-player or more game, you could collect a lot of points.
Right.
Now, most people won't allow that to happen, but it's pretty significant if you can get it to happen.
The last one are the claws. And most people overlook this. Every game we've played, people are like, I'm not sure that this ability is all that great.
When we first started playing, we thought,
It's
but
so
it's
good.
Yeah,
it is really good. So having one claw attached to your guy allows you to displace a worker that has only one genetic component attached
Right.
to them. So
Or less.
Or less. So if I had this worker not placed, I could move and displace this guy. Whenever you displace someone, they go to the worker lounge, and that player gets to collect either a money or a
Yeah,
food.
quick bonus.
Yeah, so you can't place your workers in any place anyone has any workers. So they're one shots for everybody.
Right.
Unless you have claws. Double claws allows you to displace anybody.
Right.
It doesn't matter if they have 1 or 2 genetic components attached to that particular worker.
Yeah, the claws basically, in various levels, let you break the cardinal rule
Yeah.
of worker placement games,
Right.
where you can't go somewhere
Right.
that someone already has taken. So they are very powerful. Plus, there are some cool synergy cards with the perks, where you can use a perk card to gather points based on how many people are in the worker lounge. So if you're going around with your claws bumping people and sending them all to the worker lounge, there are points to be scored that way.
Sure.
There's a lot of really cool synergies with those perk cards that work with all of those components.
So that's basically the game. It's going to take place over 5 rounds. Everyone's going to place their workers, go through the splicing portion, pay their food, and then start another round. Each round, there's 2 portions in the game where the game kind of ramps up a little
Yep.
bit. Once you pass round 2 and go into round 3, you're going to deal 3 new perk cards out to the table, which just allows,
Regardless of how many are already out there.
Right.
So you could have 6 total at that point.
you will unlock Command Hub B, which means there's just more areas in order to build. There's also that ability. Command B and Command A are pretty much the same thing, except Command A is the only place that lets you get this first player marker.
Right.
And then everybody is going to advance 1 on their technology track. Now, the big thing is that your build bonuses after this phase are worth ×2. So when you build something that's worth 2 victory points, it's actually worth 4 victory points.
Right.
And this will happen again once you go into the last round. You're going to deal 3 new perks face up. Again, more options for people to acquire. Everyone, again, is going to move up their technology track, which will open up either workers or more perks that they can acquire. And then everything in round 5 is ×3.
Which is significant. It's something that you really have to pay attention to, because those modules, they have their base value printed on them. You really need to remember that after round 2, and especially after round 5, you want to be able to build, because those are some pretty significant points. You build a 3-point tile, you're getting 9 points. And 9 points in this game is not insignificant. You know, with scores that reach just over 100 or maybe a little more than that,
right.
You know, it's a 10% boon by adding something like that.
So David, I know we don't want to get into a review of this game, but there's a couple things I need to talk about just to let people know my feelings about it. I love worker placement games. I always have. They are probably the number one mechanic in a game that draws me in. The artwork in this game is absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen some concern online about it, but this is so Pixar-ish that I love it. It fits the tone of the game perfectly.
Yeah, it's playful, and what I don't think there is enough of in the industry are really good medium weight to beyond Euro type mechanics that have that playful feeling.
Yeah,
they're all too, you know, often very dry and somewhat drab and Euro-y.
Yeah,
and it's refreshing to see that sort of Euro genre branch out into something that's way more friendly.
100% agree. The part that I really like about this game and really latches on is the variability in it. The perk cards, the modules, the timing aspect of the splicing lab is so appealing to me because it allows you, like in other games that have used this aspect before, it allows you to take your actions later in the round in order to do specific things that you may have planned for strategically at the start of the round. For instance, someone may be blocking this command hub for you, and you really want the first player marker because you have big dreams for the next round. You can acquire 2 of these claws, put them in here, or have 1 claw attached, and splice that in, and then bump that player out.
Right.
You know, the timing aspect of that portion of the game is so appealing to me.
Well, it makes for some really super satisfying moves. Like I said, when you're able to add the component right at the right time and go out to the board after everyone's placed and do something that everyone wasn't expecting.
Right.
That is not only satisfying, but also potentially game-changing for your score at that point.
And these cards, the perks in general are great, but the ones that have the command modules, I tend to gravitate towards because I love that ability to be able to do things that are just mine and then really lock into that strategy. It's almost like a tableau building. I don't want to say it is because you're not really building a giant tableau. You'll probably have 3 of these by the end of the game.
It's a nice taste of that mechanic,
but it's a taste of it, and it's spliced into a
no pun
intended. It's spliced into a worker placement game that has a really cool theme that's wrapped around it that, as you said, is not typical with Euro-style games. So I love this game. I've actually talked to a lot of people about it and said this is, out of all the TMG games, and I'm not just a TMG fan, but this is probably one of my favorite, besides Orleans, this is one of my favorite TMG games.
It'd be hard to bump Orleans, but this game... it was much better than I expected. In fact, when I heard the name Chimera Station, for whatever reason, I didn't even think that it was going to be playful.
Sure.
I don't know. But once you see the box, once you see the logo, you can tell.
Not this box.
Not this box. But once you see the artwork and the logo and the components, I mean, especially the components, you know that this is going to be a really playful game.
Sure.
I hope that, if you're a hardcore Euro fan, that you don't, like I think you said, you've seen on it, dismiss it as, I don't know. Because even though it has that playful feeling, I don't think there's another worker placement game that really captures some of the things that they've done here.
And they did the timing of it. I know your big concern with the game was it was only 5 rounds the first couple times we played it, but it feels like it's perfect. I mean, the more I've played this game, the more that 5 rounds feels just perfect. The station's built out enough. You've had enough cards. You've used your workers correctly. It was because I was early in the game. I was kind of wondering, is 5 rounds going to be enough? I do think, in retrospect, I think it's enough. What I'll say about the 5 rounds is the game builds over time. Yeah.
So in the first round, you're thinking, how are we going to fill this board?
Yeah.
It feels like it's going slowly.
Yeah.
But not slow in a bad way. But then as it ramps up, it's one of those games that ramp up, and that's always satisfying to me when a game feels like it starts to snowball. The scoring also starts to snowball because you're scoring a few points at the beginning, but in the end, you're making some moves that score some pretty big points.
But by then, you should have the components and the strategy in place in order to make your strategy work for you at the end of the game. And that's the other part of the game, is that how you build these modules out and how you place them and which ones you're going for. And there is a limited amount of modules. We didn't mention that. Once they're gone, they're gone. If you were ever to acquire something, you just get a straight up 2 victory points, which isn't that satisfying when you need that. Not module, components. I keep using the wrong word. And when those components are limited. So,
it's kind of a consolation prize of getting 2 points. So it's 2 points, but that's nowhere near as good as getting the component. Anything
else you want to say? I think we've covered just about everything in the game.
I think we have. I mean, I know this is likely a stretch goal, but I can't say enough about this. Side B is really cool.
Yeah.
It adds not only an ongoing power specific to your race, but the research progression is completely different. So you're starting with different things, and then you're gaining different things at the end. I mean, a lot of these research ones on side A, everyone's just getting 8 points, correct?
And the other thing, which you mentioned earlier was on this guy, double plants for him is +3. The components that you have on your character even affect the differences of your player.
That blows the game open, in my opinion. It makes it so much better than it already is.
Sure. So that is Chimera Station. Check it out on Kickstarter. Fantastic game. We both very much enjoy it. These are cool. I mean, I don't know how you can pass up on these workers. So anyway, thanks guys for watching. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and all of our social media aspects. Make comments below. Let us know how you would like us to change the channel or review something that would be interesting to you. So thanks guys for watching.
Bye-bye.